The Bitcoin supply shock is now going nuclear. This week alone, just 9 public companies came out and announced that they're buying 11,000 Bitcoin. That's 4x the supply that's mined this week. And if you thought that was bullish, check this out. We have even more news to cover this week. We've got Vivek Ramaswamy, the man whose name sounds like a piece of deli meat. He just announced a $1 billion buy, but we've also got little Japanese player called Metaplanet who now holds more Bitcoin than Tesla as they announced another enormous buy this week with their holdings of Bitcoin going absolutely parabolic. And then we've got the breaking news I want to cover. This is the man whose face is on the thumbnail of today's show. Anthony Pompliano just raised $1 billion, which is the largest initial treasury fundraise in history. Let's hear from the man here.
Just about your own life.
Yeah.
So you're going to have now the Pompliano empire between the SPAC, which you're working on, between this effort, between your media efforts. How are you going to devote yourself to these different activities?
Yeah. Well, today we're announcing what is the largest initial fundraise for a publicly traded Bitcoin treasury company in history. We've raised over $750 million. It's a $1 billion merger with the Columbus Circle SPAC. And the idea here is we want to really be successful in the financial services sector. And so if you think about this ProCap SPAC, that is a dollar-denominated vehicle to go and do an acquisition. The ProCap Financial is the exact same thing. It's a publicly traded company where we can go and we can acquire Bitcoin.
Right.
And so I think that that is where my entire career has sat. I sit at the intersection between the internet and the Bitcoiners and the institutional world. We've been very fortunate to have a lot of institutional investors participate in this round. But also, I think that there is a dollar-denominated world and there's a Bitcoin-denominated world. And what I want to do is continue to sit at the intersection of that and provide ability not only for myself and our shareholders.
Are you operating these businesses? Are you effectively the CEO operating them, or are you going to have teams that are doing this for you? How's this going to work?
Some of the different vehicles, obviously, we will hire entire dedicated teams. In the private market, that's what we've done. We own a lot of businesses. We have CEOs and executive teams that run those businesses. I will be the CEO of ProCap Financial, which is the business combination with Columbus Circle. And what I believe is the opportunity there is you're able to acquire Bitcoin, but then not only just acquire Bitcoin. Buying Bitcoin and allowing it to go up in price obviously has been a successful strategy, but I believe that the future of these companies is going to be how do you build revenue and profit, the financial services on top of that. No different than if you look at the traditional financial service firms. They have a balance sheet of dollars and they go and they build these financial services on top that drive revenue.
All right, I'm sure you guys get it. I'm sure you guys understand how this cookie is crumbling. We now have these huge companies fighting with each other to issue billion-dollar buys for Bitcoin. To put this into perspective, that's what, 10,000 coins, $1 billion buy. That's pretty insane when we consider that, 450 Bitcoin is mined every day. And we're now just seeing company after company after company issue these huge billion-dollar buys. Again, Vivek Ramaswamy, that name always gets me. He is coming out and issuing $1 billion more to buy Bitcoin. And what I find fascinating is this trend is actually continuing. This is the trend we took a little bit of a peep at last week, and we said, hey, it's pretty concerning that there's 27 public companies having adopted a Bitcoin treasury strategy in the past month alone. But guess what? That number has risen once again, and we're now up to, by the looks of it today, we look as if we are up to 29 in the past 30 days. So we are seeing one new treasury company added to this list every single month. And we can, one treasury company a day. What we can see here is Tesla, they're number 8 on the list. Metaplanet just climbed above Tesla. That's pretty huge when we start thinking about it. This is really interesting. And I think the rise of this treasury company answers the question from spiraling 69 in the chat, who I hope is not spiraling into deep red losses holding altcoins, because this cycle is different. We've been screaming it from the rooftops for a long time now. This cycle is fundamentally different because who is the buyer in this Bitcoin cycle? Who is the big allocator? Who is it? It's BlackRock, sovereign wealth funds, it's pension funds, it's public corporations, it's nation states. These guys are not buying altcoins. Think about that for a minute. These guys aren't buying altcoins, they're buying Bitcoin. And their kind of access to the Bitcoin capital market, or their way to get Bitcoin exposure, is through these treasury companies. This is why we're seeing them become more and more volatile. I believe these are the altcoins of this cycle. Now, again, we've got some another interesting comment. We're stuck in the $105,000 range. Make it make sense. Well, I got a tweet for you guys that I want to cover because I think this tweet does make it make sense. Corey Bates, friend of the channel, he came out and said Strategy, Semler, and Metaplanet have bought 12,000 Bitcoin this week. There's only 3,100 Bitcoin mined this week. And he says, how, TF, is Bitcoin not at $250,000 right now? Now, this is going to open up the discussion around where we're going to go towards the end of today's show. I want to talk about paper Bitcoin. You guys know I love to talk about paper Bitcoin. I think we've seen a little bit of an update in the realm of paper Bitcoin that I do find awfully interesting. We can see one of the reasons for why we're not at $255,000 now at the time of this video is simply because right now, these allocators are very smart with how they're dipping their little toe into Bitcoin, okay? They're buying it very slowly. They're splitting up their buys. These guys aren't just smash buying, wads of $1 million of Bitcoin every second when they want to buy it. They're being a lot more methodical with how they just kind of average into the Bitcoin market. And this is why we can see the coins on exchanges continuing to drop and drop and drop and drop. We can see this trend is only accelerating. This is a parabola to the downside because why? Well, because we are seeing these treasury companies aggressively accumulate Bitcoin at some pretty obscene rates. It's wild watching what is going on with these Bitcoin treasury companies. They are right now buying all of is obviously an exaggeration, but they are buying all of the newly issued supply. Just these new companies in the Bitcoin space alone, it's pretty crazy when we think about it. Here's another little update for treasury companies: Metaplanet's Locate Tech Strategy. They had a little bit of a busy stacking day, pulling in 2,000 coins when, again, only 400 is mined every day. That is 400 to 500% of the total Bitcoin supply. And I think now it's nearly every week we see another one of these huge companies announced. Pompliano is poking a little bit of fun at GameStop here, saying, come on, boys, you need to increase your Bitcoin buys, because we can see already ProCap BTC, led by Anthony Pompliano, is now at number 13 in the list of Bitcoin treasury companies, sitting on about 5,000 coins already. So they've jumped GameStop, they've jumped Boya International, they've jumped Hive Digital Technologies. So this is really interesting. This is going parabolic. This Bitcoin treasury race is not slowing down. I think it's absolutely fascinating to see where it is going. Again, I want to leave the paper Bitcoin speculation until a little bit later on into today's video. The next thing I want to talk about is kind of talking about the end game. I think the public Bitcoin treasury strategy does have an end game, and I think it's coming much quicker than most people think. Let's listen to Michael Saylor's warning about how many treasury companies we could be seeing in the not too distant future.
A treasury company is a motor on the network, right? Torquing the network, right? And so as they get bigger, they're going to get exponentially more powerful. Metaplanet is getting exponentially more powerful. Semler is getting exponentially more powerful. We are getting more powerful, right? So I think that they're part of the dynamic that's going to drive the market. But my thought is it should be growing 30 to 60% a year for the next decade, and my long-term forecast is 30%, 29% ARR over about 21 years. So I haven't changed my view on that, and I think that everyone that gets involved, you are a driver, right? Everybody in this room is a driver. Every company that adopts Bitcoin is a driver. Every time a politician advocates for it, they're driving it forward. But you know what? Every single time a politician blocks something or reacts negatively to, they're driving it forward. Right? You can't pay for the marketing we just got in Arizona. Right? That's going to catalyze millions and millions of people to say, well, what is this thing? Was that the right decision? Right? Should we reevaluate this? So I think that everything is good for Bitcoin.
So Strategy is the company whose phone is always going to be ringing as new companies start to enter into this market. What sense are you getting that this is really accelerating at a much faster pace than people are thinking?
I think a year ago, there was us, and then Semler and MetaPlanet, which are companies with an operating strategy that adopted a Bitcoin strategy. And really, that was just a year ago. Right, came out and said that they were going to adopt a Bitcoin treasury company strategy. And now we're up to 70 companies. So if you extrapolate that out, that means that next year, right, we could be at 700 companies, right? And I think, look, success breeds interest. And we're at a time when there is just a lot of uncertainty in the economic environment, which causes companies to ask themselves, how do we create value for our shareholders? And if they go out and they just say, let's look at the top 15 companies in the world last year, you know, number one is MetaPlanet. Semler follows somewhere in there, and I think we were number 14, right? Like, you would think that that would cause people to be interested. I think the other piece is, you know, a lot of folks talk about the Overton window and what's happening with the US government and the embracement of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, digital asset framework, stablecoin bills. We have an administration who's very supportive of Bitcoin. It makes everybody wake up and say, hey, what is this Bitcoin thing? Right? So I think we're early, but I think the acceleration is real. And I think, you know, from last year to this year, right? We held this conference last year in Las Vegas. I think there are about 50 to 100 attendees. This year we're at 300 attendees. And I think in this room, there's probably 400 interested folks, right? Next year, maybe we'll have 1,000, right? So I think the acceleration is absolutely real.
The acceleration is absolutely real. I tend to agree with that. And this is the scariest thing about these treasury companies adopting Bitcoin. They're not slowing down. And this is naturally just going to drain the Bitcoin supply much quicker than most people think. Again, we did a video last week here on the channel. And again, look at that big red box. There was 27 public companies adopting Bitcoin over a 30-day period. And I ran the hypothetical thought experiment. I said, what actually happens if we continue to see one treasury company adopting Bitcoin every single day? This was 2 weeks ago. Again, not a ton of data, I know that, but we are seeing this trend accelerate. Now we've got 29 public companies adopting Bitcoin in the rolling past 30 days. So again, we've got other CEOs of public companies predicting there might be thousands, maybe 700 publicly traded companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So I do think this trend is really starting to just motor along now, and it's beginning to get more and more interesting. Now, what I'm finding even more interesting is that as Bitcoin is being stripped off the exchanges, we're seeing some interesting developments happen when it comes to maybe the rhetoric. Before we get to the rhetoric, I want to do a quick check-in on where MicroStrategy is at right now. I got a couple of messages over the past couple of weeks. People are a little bit dismayed with their bags. This here is MicroStrategy at $387 per share. And I think there's a lot of confusion in the market right now why MicroStrategy is aggressively pumping in the way it is, and why other companies are, well, like Metaplanet, looking like this. This is kind of an insane chart. Let me try to get more of that hot sauce for you guys. Let me get a little bit more data. Let me take a peep here. I want to try to get you guys the full chart so you can see everything. Again, I don't like to cherry pick charts here. This is a 10-year chart that went all the way back to 2013. Have a look at how aggressive this rise has been from Metaplanet. Since they adopted Bitcoin, they're up 10,280%. Boy, my quick math serves me correctly. Is that 100x? A 120x? I believe it is. That's kind of insane when you think about it. But of course, not all treasury companies are created equally, which is interesting. Semler Scientific just kind of chopped sideways since they adopted Bitcoin. And most interestingly, GameStop, let's take a peep at that. Not a whole lot of action. That has also just been trending sideways. So who knows whether these treasury companies will be the altcoins of this cycle. I think there's another really interesting comment I want to dive into here. Bitcoin is only 7% away from its all-time high, but Bitcoin miners are about 50% away from their all-time high. This is why, again, I like to caution a lot of, I like to exercise caution, because a lot of people thought that these mining companies were just going to be the plays. A lot of people thought that these mining companies would be the ones to outperform Bitcoin in the bull run. And a lot of people probably put a lot of money into them and they've been wrecked because right now we're just not seeing it. Right platforms, a long way away from its all-time high. Marathon, have they changed their name recently? Apologies, I don't know if that's the correct Marathon. Marathon Digital? Okay, there we go. That's the one. That's also a long way away from its 75%, down from its all-time high. 83%. Okay, so again, this is why I like to exercise a lot of caution to you guys. Just be careful with what you buy. Just because it's associated with Bitcoin doesn't mean it's going to outperform Bitcoin. I don't see any institutions moving into altcoins, to be quite honest with you guys. What I'm actually seeing that's most concerning or most hilarious is altcoins are actually moving into Bitcoin. Yes, you heard me right. We're actually seeing some of the largest altcoins begin to buy Bitcoin for their treasuries. This is pretty insane, don't you think? Considering for years these guys said, yeah, you know what, we're going to create the new Bitcoin. Bitcoin's useless. Bitcoin's boring. Bitcoin has no use case. In the example of yours truly, Charles Hoskinson, he used to say, oh, but proof of stake's the revolution. Proof of work is dirty for the environment. Well, guess what they're doing now? We can see Charles Hoskinson is proposing to buy $100 million worth of Bitcoin. That's kind of insane. One of the biggest altcoins in the world. We can see here, this is a real article. This isn't fake news. This is real. We also see recently, I believe Polkadot is doing the same. This is, again, another top 10 altcoin. I might break this down in a video for you guys in the future. But we're seeing all of the biggest altcoins making a little bit of a pivot into Bitcoin. I find that absolutely fascinating. I find it very, very interesting. Because I don't see any institutions moving into altcoins. I just don't see it. Maybe I'm blind, but I just do not see it. What I do see, though, is risks on the horizon. What I do see is some really interesting developments. So for a long time, I've been warning you guys about Coinbase and BlackRock's paper Bitcoin attack. We've been talking about it for months, but I think something that might have happened literally today could be even more threatening to Bitcoin than Coinbase and BlackRock. Everybody's been talking about this brand new announcement that is forcing the two largest mortgage issuers in America, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, to accept Bitcoin for mortgages. So a lot of people are saying, this is great. This is a good thing. I can use Bitcoin as equity or as a down payment to get a mortgage. Sign me up. Where do I sign? Show me that dotted line. But this is the dotted line that I think not enough people are paying attention to. Take a little peek there at what I've underlined there with that big red line. I'm going to read it out for you guys because I think it's interesting. Each enterprise is directed to consider only cryptocurrency assets that can be evidenced and stored on a US regulated, centralized exchange, subject to all applicable laws. So I don't know if you guys are picking up what I'm putting down, but I think the master plan here is you dangle the carrot in front of Bitcoiners. You say, hey, you've been hodling your Bitcoin for a long time now. Here's this tasty little carrot. Put your Bitcoin on a centralized exchange and we'll give you a loan for it. And then you can go and actually sell your Bitcoin. You can liquidate some of that capital and you can go out there and buy a home. I think this announcement is one of the biggest pieces of news that I've seen in all of 2025. It obviously has the potential to be really bullish. Okay, this genuinely does have the potential to be really bullish. But then on the other side of the equation, that language, it really kind of made the hair on the back of my neck stand up a little bit because there's a little bit of red flags going on there. Why do you have to put Bitcoin on a centralized exchange to get a mortgage? I don't get it. I don't like it. I think this is a story I want to watch as it evolves because I think it's a fascinating one. Everybody's talking about this and they think this is incredibly bullish. I'm not sold yet. I'm simply not sold. Obviously, real estate's one of the fastest growing markets in the entire world. Yes, I didn't stutter when I said it was $350 trillion in size. It is one of the biggest markets in the world. And again, don't get me wrong. I think this is interesting. I got a couple of takes on this though as well. I actually think this is somewhat inevitable. So think about this for a minute. The real estate market, I'm going to show you how big it is in comparison to Bitcoin. So this is showing us all the money in the world visualized. We can see Bitcoin here, very tiny, very small, insignificant. Today, it's worth about $2 trillion. Now let's scroll down. We're looking at the $35 trillion global money supply, $250 trillion of global debt. And then we got real estate. This website's slightly outdated, but you can see just how big the real estate market is when we compare that to the tiny little one block that Bitcoin is. This thing is rows of hundreds. It's insane when you think about it, okay? So Bitcoin is small, but it's growing very quickly. And again, we've kind of made the case here on the channel for a little while now that Bitcoin is going to drain the real estate market. This has been my hypothesis for a long time. I've ran the numbers. Out of that $350 trillion stuffed into the global real estate market, about $220 to about $250 trillion is a monetary premium. Okay, I calculated that by just looking at the price of real estate before 1971. So again, real estate kind of has this utility value. And, you know, before we blew up the global money supply and we started, you know, printing money out of the wazoo, it typically costs somewhere around 2 to 3 times the average person's income to buy the average size home. Now it's 7, 8. In Sydney, Australia, it's 21. You need 21 times the average person's income to buy that average size home. Average home's nearly 2 million Australian cuckbucks. It's pretty insane when you think about the fact that the average wage is less than 100,000. So again, like if you look before 1971, real estate was priced much differently compared to where it's priced today. Okay, which is why I think it's really interesting that we've seen this move now, and I think the timing of all of these things is really interesting. We can actually, we take a little bit of a peep at this. I want to dive into, let's call it maybe another controversial take. So I think the only way to stop a $350 trillion exodus out of that real estate market was to do this. Now Bitcoiners no longer have to sell their Bitcoin to go out there and buy real estate. They can actually use it as collateral. I do think this is a really interesting development. I think it's fascinating. Again, if you guys are looking to actually get some liquidity from your Bitcoin without putting it on a centralized exchange like the Federal Housing Commission wants you to do, I always encourage you guys to check out FIREFISH. They are a Bitcoin native peer-to-peer Bitcoin lending platform. That means you can borrow against your Bitcoin. And again, FIREFISH never takes custody of your Bitcoin. This is very different to the lending platforms we saw in 2022, like BlockFi, Celsius, FTX, and all of those other shenanigans riddled exchanges that we saw in 2022. FIREFISH uses Bitcoin multi-signature vaults. And again, like I said, they do not take custody of your Bitcoin. So again, if you are looking to actually borrow against your Bitcoin to buy a house, again, nothing I say on this channel is financial advice, but you can get 30% off your first loan with FIREFISH if you use the promo code linked down below in the description of today's video. That's Luke, all capital letters. It rhymes with puke. It's easy to remember. It's LUKE, and that puppy will get you 30% off the fees on your first loan. So I highly recommend you check out FIREFISH, and I highly recommend you guys be incredibly cautious when the US Federal Housing Agency comes out and welcomes Bitcoin and says, yeah, you know what? We will accept your Bitcoin and quote unquote crypto for a mortgage, but you have to put your Bitcoin on a centralized exchange. That is dangerous. That is what I do not want to be looking at. That should be placed in the same place as the wazoo, as Knox Bill here in the chat says. You should definitely not be trusting centralized exchanges, guys. Just be really cautious with it. Be incredibly cautious. I do think it is inevitable, to Dr. Daniel Howe's point in the chat. Bitcoin will always leak into the banks, but will never leak back out. That's an interesting take. I do think that's really interesting. Now, to Boy Hustle's comment here, why don't these big guys just smash buy Bitcoin on the exchange? Why not? Well, that is because they're trying to actively buy as much as they can. All of these treasury companies I show you and talk about here on all the time, these guys are not just looking to buy 100 Bitcoin and then just flip their Bitcoin and sell it in a bull run. What's really interesting is they're all aggressively increasing their holdings of Bitcoin. You can see there's a bar here that shows the direction of their Bitcoin holdings. More than 90% of these companies are aggressively increasing their holdings. Many of them are putting all of their money into Bitcoin, and then whenever they make new money or they raise new money, new capital, they increase their Bitcoin holdings. So if a Bitcoin treasury company's goal is to buy as much Bitcoin as possible, they obviously want the price to stay where it is so they can buy as much as possible. Okay, this is, again, one of the really interesting things we're seeing developing this cycle. It is not slowing down. It's accelerating. It looks as if, I think this is going to be the Bitcoin cycle for altcoins. Let me rephrase that. I think altcoins die this Bitcoin bull run, and I think the Bitcoin treasury companies is the new altcoin. It is the new kind of alpha, the beta. It is the outperformer. Now, again, I recommend you guys steer clear or just be very cautious with what you're buying. Again, I tell you guys all the time, more than 99% of my net worth is locked up in Bitcoin. It's off exchanges and it's in multi-signature vaults that I can't even spend if I wanted to. I need to go to multiple countries to be able to spend my Bitcoin. So again, from a safety perspective, that's what I recommend. Again, if you are looking to buy some Bitcoin, I always encourage you guys to check out what the Bitcoin Well is doing. Make sure you use promo code GREENCANDLE and you can receive some Bitcoin Wishing Well tokens when you buy Bitcoin on the Bitcoin Wishing Well. And again, if you are looking for tighter fees, tighter spreads, and if you're looking to buy a large amount of Bitcoin over the counter, the Bitcoin Well does have their Bitcoin Infinity program, where you can, as you can see, click on that little button, book a call with a specialist, and grab a slot on a calendar or at a time that suits you best for you to have your hand held through the Bitcoin buying process. Again, I've had a lot of people ask me for this product. It's very difficult to find someone who actually, acts as a broker and helps you buy your Bitcoin. Again, I know that 91% of you guys watching these videos are above the ages of 35. I might have doxed some of you guys, but that just means a lot of you guys just want help buying your Bitcoin. I get it. Bitcoin's difficult to understand at first. I get it. I like to keep it simple though. You buy your Bitcoin, you get it off an exchange, and you put it in a hardware wallet, and you back up that hardware wallet the way it should be backed up. Which again, probably reminds me to give a little bit of a shout out to the other show sponsor or show partner who I've actually been with for over a year now. And that is, of course, Stampseed. Again, I always tell you guys, do not write down your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words on paper. Stamp it into titanium. I think these plates from Stampseed are the industry standard when it comes to your precious Bitcoin backup. Again, your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words is incredibly precious. If you have it in your house with your hardware wallet, it's not the best practice. I know a lot of people do it, but if you have a house fire or a flood, or even if you just have a maid or a cleaner not understand what they're looking at or what is on that piece of paper and they throw it out, you could be screwed. Okay, so again, really take care of your Bitcoin backup. I have been telling you guys for a year now, get your hands on these titanium plates. I think there is no second best. So again, you guys can get, I think it's 15% off anything you want to buy from Stampseed with that promo code, again, linked down below, which is Luke15. And you can get as many plates as your heart desires. I know some people have some multi-signature setups that they might want a few plates for. So again, take advantage of that discount. It does apply to as many plates or as many hammers that you want to buy. And again, I think Stephen here in the chat makes a great point. Centralized entities are needing relevance. They need Bitcoin to achieve relevance. This is all true. Again, a lot of people think that the institutions coming into Bitcoin, it's 100% a bad thing. It's proof that Bitcoin's failed. There's some people who think Bitcoin's just decentralized money that should stay outside the system forever. And this is not true. Okay, if Bitcoin is going to be what we think it is, for it to actually succeed, it's going to be welcomed and adopted by everyone. I think what some people are missing is they're scared that Coinbase and BlackRock and these large nation states are adopting Bitcoin, but they don't understand that this is fine as long as these guys can't change Bitcoin. Again, this is a really big caveat that I think gets missed a lot. Bitcoin cannot be changed. We saw this in the 2017 block size wars. Bitcoin is immutable, uncensorable, decentralized, and it is money with rules without rulers. And with all that said, if you want to learn more about why we think Bitcoin is money without rulers and where the end game of this situation leads us. Again, if Bitcoin is decentralized and it can't be changed, how do we value Bitcoin? Well, I'm going to put 2 videos up on screen, somewhere around there and there. And if you click on those links, it's going to take you to a couple of videos where I do some deep dives on that topic. And with all that said, thank you so much to the 785 of you guys tuning in. Hope you have a good day. I'll see you all in the next one.